For nearly a century, a single stretch of cold, dark water in the Scottish Highlands has haunted the imagination of the entire world. Loch Ness, a place of eerie silence, rolling mists, and shadows that seem to move even when the wind is still, has become more than a lake. It is an obsession, a myth, and perhaps, as new discoveries now suggest, a terrifying reality that science can no longer ignore. It all began, officially, on May 2nd, 1933, when the Inverness Courier published a short article about a local couple who claimed to have seen a tremendous upheaval on the surface of the loch. The water churned violently, they said, and then a creature enormous, dark, and glistening rose from the depths before vanishing again into the mist. That single report changed everything. Within weeks, hundreds of people flocked to the Highlands. Newspapers from London to New York seized the story. Photographers set up camps along the shore, and suddenly, the quiet loch was no longer a place of solitude, but the stage for one of the most enduring mysteries of the modern age. And then came the photo, the one that would make history. In April of 1934, a London surgeon named Robert Kenneth Wilson captured what appeared to be the unmistakable image of a long-necked creature emerging from the lake. The photograph, elegant and ghostly, was published in the Daily Mail, and within hours, it was everywhere. The world had its proof. The Loch Ness Monster was real, or so it seemed. For decades, the surgeon's photograph, as it came to be known, was treated as irrefutable evidence. Experts argued, skeptics mocked, but the image endured the perfect blend of credibility and mystery. Even when other photos surfaced, when sightings multiplied, none carried the same weight. The long, graceful neck, the rippling water, the uncanny stillness. It was too convincing, too cinematic to forget. But as time passed, cracks began to appear in the legend. In 1994, 60 years after its publication, a shocking confession surfaced. The famous photo was a hoax. One of the conspirators, Christian Sperling, confessed on his deathbed that the monster was nothing more than a small toy submarine fitted with a sculpted head. The world laughed. The myth, it seemed, was over. And yet, the laughter didn't last. Because even as the hoax was exposed, people kept seeing something. Fishermen, scientists, tourists, men and women from all walks of life continued to report shapes moving beneath the surface, sonar readings of enormous fast-moving objects, and wakes in the water with no visible cause. The monster might have been born from myth, but the evidence refused to die. The truth, as scientists are beginning to admit, is far stranger than fiction. To understand it, we have to look at Loch Ness itself, not the stories, but the place. The loch is a geological anomaly, carved by glaciers during the last ice age, stretching more than 37 kilometers long and plunging to depths of over 230 meters. It contains more water than all the lakes in England and Wales combined, and its pitch-black color isn't due to pollution, but to peat organic matter that stains the water like ink, swallowing light even on the brightest days. In such darkness, you could swim 10 feet from a creature the size of a bus and never see it. The loch is also connected to an underground system of rivers and smaller lochs through fissures and channels that extend for kilometers beneath the highlands. It's not a sealed lake, it's part of a vast, unseen network. That is where the mystery deepens. For centuries, locals spoke of strange movements in the water long before the 20th century sightings. In the 6th century, the Irish monk Saint Columba supposedly confronted a water beast in the River Ness. The legend says he commanded the creature to retreat in the name of God, and it obeyed. Whether myth or memory, the story suggests that something in these waters has haunted human minds for over 1,000 years. But what could it be? Through the 20th century, theories ranged from the absurd to the scientific. Some believe Nessie was a surviving plesiosaur, a marine reptile thought to have gone extinct 65 million years ago. The theory made headlines and inspired generations of monster hunters, but biologists dismissed it quickly. A breeding population of such creatures could never survive undetected in one small lake. Others proposed a giant eel, a sturgeon, or a catfish, magnified by imagination and fog. Still others whispered about the supernatural, a guardian spirit of the loch, a manifestation of ancient Celtic deities, or even a transdimensional phenomenon. And yet, despite decades of sonar sweeps, underwater photography, and even satellite imaging, the mystery remained unresolved. Each time science tried to close the case, the loch seemed to mock it, producing one more anomaly, one more unexplained movement, one more shadow that didn't belong. That changed in 2018, when an international research team led by Professor Neil Gemmell from the University of Otago in New Zealand decided to apply a radical new technique: environmental DNA analysis. By collecting and sequencing microscopic fragments of genetic material floating in the water, scientists could build a complete biological fingerprint of everything living in the loch: fish, algae, bacteria, even the rarest animals. It was, for the first time, a true scientific attempt to answer the question once and for all. When the results were published in 2019, they were supposed to end the debate forever. But instead, they did something far stranger. They made it worse. The study revealed traces of over 3,000 species living in the loch, from tiny microorganisms to large fish. But among all the DNA sequences, there were none from any large reptiles, no plesiosaurs, no sturgeons, and no unknown animals. In other words, no monster. At least, not the one everyone expected, because the researchers did find something else, something that didn't make sense. Throughout the loch, in every single sample, they found unusually high concentrations of eel DNA, far higher than in any comparable body of water. According to their models, this could indicate the presence of giant eels, potentially several meters long. And that, they said, might finally explain the legend. A giant eel, sinuous, fast, and often surfacing, could easily appear like a long-necked creature when viewed from a distance. The peat-dark water and the distorted reflections could exaggerate its size. Over centuries, countless fleeting glimpses of these enormous eels might have evolved into the myth of the Loch Ness Monster. It was, at last, a logical answer, but it wasn't the end. Because when the results were presented to the scientific community, some biologists noticed something strange in the sequencing data traces of unknown DNA fragments that didn't match any known species. These fragments were dismissed as contamination in the official report. But a few researchers, studying the raw data, argued that the pattern didn't look random. It was structured, repetitive, almost as if it came from an organism yet to be identified. Could the scientists have accidentally found something entirely new? The team never followed up publicly. The samples were sealed, and the research moved on. But whispers began to circulate that deep in Loch Ness, below the sonar, beyond the reach of sunlight, there might still be something alive. And this time, it might not be a monster of myth, but a relic of a forgotten age. After the 2019 DNA analysis, the world seemed ready to close the book on Loch Ness. Newspapers called it a victory for science. The legend, they said, had finally been explained. No prehistoric creature, no sea serpent, no mystery. Just a few oversized eels and a century of exaggeration. But for those who know the loch, who have walked its shores in the silent hours before dawn, the explanation felt hollow, because Loch Ness, despite all our instruments, has never yielded its full truth to anyone. The scientists packed up their boats and sensors, but the locals stayed behind, watching the surface ripple in the cold wind. To them, the monster was not a joke or a myth. It was something they felt, a presence they could not name but refused to forget. And in the years that followed, something strange began to happen. The more technology we used to study the loch, the more the data seemed to resist us. Sonar readings showed massive moving shapes one moment, and then nothing at all the next. High-definition cameras recorded sudden flashes, reflections, or disturbances, events that couldn't be verified, yet couldn't be dismissed. It was as if the loch itself was alive, responding to observation by hiding its secrets deeper. Then, in 2021, a team of Norwegian and Scottish oceanographers returned to Loch Ness with equipment far more advanced than anything used before. Their goal was not to find a monster, but to test new deep-water mapping drones capable of operating in near total darkness. For the first time, these submersibles could scan every meter of the loch's bottom, creating a detailed three-dimensional model of its terrain. What they found shocked even the most skeptical scientists. Beneath the familiar V-shaped trench of the loch's main basin, the drones detected a vast system of fissures and tunnels extending far deeper than anyone had imagined. Some of these channels connected to subterranean caverns large enough to contain buildings. Others seemed to stretch for kilometers, linking Loch Ness to smaller, hidden lakes and even to the nearby Moray Firth, where the waters meet the North Sea. It meant that Loch Ness was not an isolated body of water, but part of a dynamic underground system, a labyrinth of geological arteries. In theory, something living within those depths could move unseen between the loch and the sea, evading every attempt to capture it. This revelation reignited the debate overnight. Suddenly, scientists who had dismissed the legend began to reconsider. If the loch was connected to the ocean, then it wasn't impossible for large marine animals to enter and remain trapped there. Whales, sharks, or giant squid could navigate those channels, survive for years, and vanish without trace. But the more they studied, the stranger it became. The sonar drones captured movements that didn't correspond to any known animal. Twice, the sensors recorded large, elongated shapes measuring between 12 and 15 meters in length. These objects moved with unnatural speed, producing low-frequency vibrations that interfered with the drone's electronics. The signals were registered for less than 30 seconds each time, then disappeared completely as if whatever was down there had sensed the intrusion and retreated. When the data was analyzed, it became clear that these shapes were not geological formations or drifting debris. They moved independently, leaving faint thermal signatures that suggested living matter. The team's leader, oceanographer Dr. Lars Gundersen, described it later as something too fast, too deliberate, and too quiet to be a fish. His report never reached the public in full. The official summary referred to anomalous readings caused by deep-water thermal stratification, a technical phrase that explained nothing. But months later, leaked correspondence between Gundersen's team members surfaced online, revealing private fears that they had stumbled upon something real, something alive. The emails spoke of sudden pressure fluctuations, power failures, and one incident when a submersible was pulled violently off course by what the crew described as a surge, as if the water itself had muscles. When the drone was recovered, its outer hull bore scratches that no one could explain, parallel grooves that seemed to curve around the machine, as though something enormous had gripped it and then released it. Gundersen's team withdrew, citing safety concerns. Yet curiosity had already spread. Within months, new expeditions began arriving, financed not by universities, but by private foundations and independent researchers. These groups brought their own agendas, some scientific, others driven by profit or belief. One of them was Dr. Eleanor Hart, a biologist from Cambridge, known for her work on deep-sea extremophiles organisms capable of surviving in conditions once thought impossible for life. Hart was skeptical of monsters but fascinated by the loch's ecosystem. In early 2022, she led a series of dives using remotely operated vehicles equipped with high-resolution cameras and biosampling arms. Her focus was not the creature itself, but the unexplored thermal vents near the loch's northern basin. What she found there changed the conversation forever. The vents emitted faint streams of warm water, not volcanic, but geothermally heated, and surrounding them were colonies of microbial mats unlike any recorded in fresh water. They glowed faintly under ultraviolet light, producing a bioluminescence usually found only in deep ocean environments. But even more surprising was what came next. In one of the video feeds, a large, shadowy shape appeared at the edge of visibility. It was serpentine, flexible, and moved with a rolling motion that disturbed the sediment below. Its estimated length was at least 12 meters. Hart's team froze, believing the camera had malfunctioned. But then the figure turned. For a fraction of a second, a pale reflection, something like an eye, flashed in the beam of the drone's light before vanishing into the blackness. When the footage was reviewed, experts confirmed it was no trick of light or debris. Whatever it was solid, biological, and massive. The sonar reading from that moment recorded a heart-like pulse, faint, rhythmic, and deliberate. Hart sent the data to several marine institutes across Europe. None could match it to any known species. The structure of the motion pattern, especially the fluid-shaped wave traveling along its body, resembled the propulsion used by eels, but on a scale that defied biology. The creature, if that's what it was, seemed capable of moving in near silence through the water, generating minimal turbulence. When the news leaked, skepticism erupted, as it always does. The British press mocked it as "the eel returns," while tabloids published sensational headlines. But behind closed doors, marine biologists, sonar engineers, and geneticists began to argue that Hart's discovery might represent something entirely new, an unknown species adapted to the extreme, lightless environment beneath Loch Ness. Weeks later, Hart's team returned for a second dive, hoping to capture clearer footage. This time, as the submersible approached the vent area, all external lights flickered and went out. For nearly 40 seconds, they operated blind. When the systems rebooted, the onboard cameras showed nothing, only a swirling cloud of disturbed silt. But the recording captured one chilling sound, a deep, resonant vibration that increased in intensity before fading into silence. It was a frequency below human hearing, but when amplified and slowed down, it revealed a strange pattern, almost like a low, drawn-out call. Some described it as a hum, others said it sounded like breathing. The team withdrew immediately, shaken but unharmed. When the data was presented to the Royal Society, the analysis revealed that the frequency matched the infrasound range known to affect human emotion, capable of inducing fear, nausea, and anxiety. It was the same frequency recorded years earlier beneath the Great Pyramid of Giza during another mysterious acoustic anomaly. Whether coincidence or connection, no one could say. But one thing was clear: Loch Ness was not silent. It was speaking in a voice too low for us to hear. By the time Dr. Hart's second expedition ended, the scientific community was split in two. On one side stood the skeptics, clinging to the comfort of data and logic, insisting that the strange frequencies and sonar readings were mere coincidences, the result of equipment malfunction or misinterpretation. On the other side were those who had seen the footage, studied the vibrations, and felt an unsettling realization settling in their chests that Loch Ness might be hiding something much older and far more complex than a simple legend. Hart herself was no longer certain of anything. She returned to Cambridge silent and withdrawn, refusing interviews, her notes sealed under non-disclosure agreements. Only fragments of her private correspondence ever reached the public letters to colleagues in which she described recurring dreams of dark water and a presence that watches from below. She wrote that the sound they recorded near water, the geothermal vents, was not random. It followed a rhythm, one that resembled communication. A few months later, the British Geological Survey launched a large-scale mapping operation of the entire region. Their goal was not to study monsters, but to update seismic data across the highlands. However, when their low-frequency sensors reached the area beneath Loch Ness, they registered something entirely unexpected. For several hours, the instruments detected a massive, slow-moving object deep within the loch's lower strata, far deeper than previously believed possible for any living creature. The data showed that the object emitted a consistent pulse, roughly every 40 seconds, resonating at the same infrasound frequency recorded by Hart's team. The movement stopped suddenly near the northern end of the loch, and the signal disappeared. What startled the scientists most was its scale. Based on the density measurements, the object was at least 15 meters long and several meters wide, far larger than any known freshwater animal. Yet its shape, reconstructed from the seismic wave distortion, was elongated and flexible, eerily similar to the old descriptions of the creature once called Nessie. That night, without any official statement, the survey's team received orders from Edinburgh to suspend their analysis. Within 24 hours, the data was transferred to a government archive and classified. Publicly, the event was described as a false seismic anomaly. Privately, several of the technicians resigned, describing nightmares and panic attacks that plagued them afterward. One of them, who later spoke anonymously to a Scottish journalist, said that while reviewing the raw sonar data, he heard something faint through the interference, a low rhythmic sound, like a heartbeat, that seemed to speed up the longer he listened. It wasn't mechanical, he said. It was alive. Meanwhile, Dr. Hart decided she could not leave the mystery unsolved. She organized one final expedition, a privately funded descent into the deepest section of Loch Ness using a custom-built submersible equipped with multispectral cameras and magnetic resonance scanners. The project was risky and expensive, but her conviction was unshakable. If something was truly there, she wanted to see it with her own eyes. On a gray morning in late October 2022, Hart and 2 engineers descended into the loch. The surface disappeared above them as the water grew darker and colder, swallowing every trace of light. The descent was slow, almost ritualistic, with the submersible lights piercing only a few meters into the blackness. The sensors recorded the familiar hum of the loch's deep currents, and then, at a depth of 240 meters, something changed. The sonar detected movement ahead, large, deliberate, and close. The water pressure fluctuated violently, as though a massive current had surged past the vessel. The external cameras caught a blur, a pale, serpentine form gliding through the darkness, turning with impossible grace. Hart's voice on the audio log trembled, but remained steady. "It's here," she said. "It's watching us." For the next 40 minutes, the creature, or whatever it was, circled the submersible. The onboard magnetic sensors spiked erratically, suggesting that the animal's body generated an electromagnetic field. The cameras captured glimpses, smooth, scale-like skin reflecting the faint light, a head tapering into a long, muscular neck, and eyes that glowed not from reflection, but from within, like twin orbs of silver light. And then, as suddenly as it appeared, it was gone. The sonar showed the creature descending into a crevice in the loch's bedrock, a narrow fissure leading into what appeared to be a massive cavern system beneath the main basin. Hart made a decision that still haunts those who knew her. She ordered the submersible to follow. The passage narrowed dangerously, the rock walls closing in on either side. The sub's hull groaned under pressure. Then, just as they entered the chamber, all contact with the surface was lost. For nearly 2 hours, the expedition support team received only static. When the submersible finally resurfaced on its emergency buoyancy system, it was empty. The rescue divers found no trace of the crew. The external hull was covered in deep scratches, long curved grooves identical to those found on Gunderson's drone the year before. The cameras had been destroyed, their lenses shattered, but the internal data recorders, protected inside a sealed compartment, survived. What they contained was so disturbing that the footage has never been released in full. Those who have seen it describe the final moments in fragments. The submersible enters a vast, dome-shaped chamber lined with smooth stone walls. At the center is a pool of shimmering metallic liquid, pulsating with light. The creature rises from it immense, pale, and silent, moving not with the sluggishness of a reptile, but with a deliberate, almost intelligent rhythm. It approaches the sub, pauses, and then releases a low-frequency sound, the same resonance recorded years earlier. The glass begins to vibrate. The lights flicker. Hart whispers something inaudible. The feed cuts out. When the record ends, only one thing remains clear. The sound frequency captured during those last seconds was not random. It followed a structured harmonic pattern, almost like a sequence of syllables, a voice. The government later declared the event an accident caused by equipment malfunction and extreme conditions, but independent analysis of the retrieved data showed otherwise. The magnetic readings within the cavern matched no known geological formation. The electromagnetic field surrounding the creature was strong enough to interfere with modern electronics, suggesting biological properties unlike any animal on Earth. If the footage is genuine, then what Hart found in the depths of Loch Ness was not a simple animal, nor a relic of prehistory. It was something far older, a species adapted to darkness, evolved beyond anything we can classify, perhaps the last surviving remnant of a world erased by time. Some scientists now speculate that the creature may not even be entirely biological, but a hybrid organism, part flesh, part mineral, a living conductor of the Earth's own electromagnetic energy. Others believe it to be an ancient sentinel, trapped in the loch since the last ice age, sustained by the geothermal vents below. Whatever the truth, it is clear that Hart's discovery changed the way science views Loch Ness forever. The lake is no longer just a myth, but a biological mystery that defies every law we know. Its silence is not empty. It is protective, almost sentient. as though guarding something too ancient and too immense for us to understand. Since that day, no new expeditions have been authorized. The official reason is safety. The unofficial one is fear. Those who study the data in private say that the infrasound frequency recorded from the creature still echoes through the loch, repeating at irregular intervals like a pulse or perhaps a warning. And when the mist rises over Loch Ness and the world falls quiet, some locals say they can feel it, a deep vibration in the ground beneath their feet, steady and alive. It is not imagination. It is not folklore. It is something ancient, breathing beneath the water, waiting for us to remember what we once knew and to realize that we were never alone.